Hello there and welcome to Adiecraft. People often ask me how they can become a better builder. Well, today is the first episode in a new series that will help you improve all elements of your building ability. Whether you're starting out in the game or a seasoned professional, there will be something here to level up your builds. Covering the fundamentals of building and design and methods that you can apply to any style or size of builds, the series will be broken down into manageable sections, each focused on a particular piece of the puzzle. With all of these put together, there'll be no limit to what you'll be able to create. The first video will be looking at the start of the process, build planning, size and shape. Before we get started in the video, please take the time to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button if you're not already, so that you won't miss out on any future episodes. It's free and it really helps the channel. Now, this may seem like an obvious one, but knowing what you want to build is an important first step. If you have a clear vision of what you're looking to achieve, then the finished outcome is going to be much better than if you just start placing blocks. If there's a certain style that you're looking for, then maybe look at some reference pictures online to give you some ideas, understand what the purpose of your build is, and if you're just looking for an aesthetic reason or if you want to use the build itself in a particular way. Once you've got a clear view in your head of what you're looking to achieve, then you're ready for the next step. The phrase location, location, location also rings very true in Minecraft, as there are 3 different dimensions that you could choose to build from, and within those dimensions, any number of different biomes and biome combinations that might fit your build. It's also important to understand the geography to make sure that your build will fit in, and also whether you've got enough space so that you can actually do everything that you'd like to do. Because of this, it's worth exploring and looking around at the various different terrains and various different areas that you could build in, just to make sure that you've picked things that are right, because there is a huge variety of possibilities. Another thing to actually understand is the direction of your build, and what I mean by that is shown here. So as you can see, we've got a house here that looks lovely, just a pretty basic house, same kind of starter house that many people might build. I've built this and I'm using shaders here, and I've built this so that the sun will catch it and it looks fantastic in the shaders. Now over here we have exactly the same house, but as you can see it's just built in a slightly different direction. Because of where the sun is in Minecraft, particularly with shaders, this will never ever get the sun on the front of the building. So again, it's very important to make sure that you are getting the right direction, the right location, and the right terrain in order to start your build process. Size and shape are the next things to consider once you know what you're building and where you want to build it. And I've hopped onto my Japanese creative world to show you what I mean. So the first thing that I'm going to be talking about is scale. A Minecraft block, as you probably know, is 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter if it were in real scale. So you can scale your builds to the real world if you wanted to using the blocks. However, you're obviously not going to be able to get so many details in. It's not quite going to match up, because when you've got meter scale things, then thin walls, partitions, stuff like that is always going to look a little bit strange. You can, however, scale your builds up and make use of some of these blocks to give you more detail, more depth, and things like a more rounded pillar that you've got on this particular Torii gate here. Then using some of the things like the trapdoors, you can carry that on round the bottom. So once you've picked your scale, then you can think about the size of the build as well. So again, all of these are Torii gates, but as you can see, they come in a variety of shapes and sizes. So you need to know that you have got enough space in terms of the footprint around your build. So you need to know roughly what size it is. Are you building a little tiny small starter house, in which case you won't need much space? Or are you building a giant mega base, in which case you'll probably need tens, if not hundreds of blocks in each direction to work out what you're going to build? Here we have an example of this in the pagoda in front of us. Now this has got a 29 by 29 footprint, so this is actually quite a big build, and obviously it goes quite high up as well. So if you're building this on top of a mountain, then you need to make sure that you've got enough space at the top so that nothing interferes with it. Again, if you wanted to build it in a cave, you need to understand the height, you need to understand the dimensions on the floor, you need to think about things like, is there going to be an overhang for a roof like this? Alternatively, you might want a pagoda, but you might want something that's considerably smaller. So you might want something that's a bit more like this, which has only got a 19 by 19 footprint and is significantly shorter. So understanding what the scale is and what the size of your build is going to be lets you work out what rough area you want for the footprint, and then you can start on the next stage of planning. Laying out your builds is a great way to make sure you understand more about what the finished result will look like. It lets you experiment with different ideas, and it means that if you're using something like Creative or World Edit and you choose to use something like wool, you can quite easily replace this with the right blocks that you're actually going to use and try different combinations of things. If you're in survival, using something like dirt or netherrack is quite useful because it allows you to place blocks that are easily removable and switch things around if you've got different ideas that you want to try out. So if we were, for example, creating a starter house, we might first of all just create a simple box like this. Now this gives us an idea when we stand on the ground or stand inside of what kind of space that we're going to be working with and what we might want to do with things. It's not a very interesting shape, so once you've got something like this, you might want to add some additional areas to it. But again, you can do this using your wool. So you might say, okay, I'm going to use some wool here, and I'm going to come out and create a little annex or extra portion on the back of the build here. That makes it already much more interesting. So say that this is the front. You might say, okay, I want to have a nice entranceway, so let's have a front coming out like this. And let's make it so we've got a nice double door in the middle, so we're going to have it too wide like so. And by adding these on and using this the wool method to actually put your frame in place, you can start to really get some interesting outcomes with what you're looking to build. So let's add another section on the end for just a little overhang bit. And what I've noticed here is we've actually built ourselves something that's got a 2-block center. Now for doing a roof and things like that, it's generally not the best. So what we'll do is we will move our wall about like this, and then we can make sure that we've got ourselves a 1-block center when we do have the roof coming across the middle. And just little things like that, being able to assess what you're actually doing as you go, makes it so much easier when you come to the build, because you've got your basic structure to work from. You're not working from nothing. Now, the builds themselves, when you're looking at a single build like this, you can also quite easily come up and say, okay, how tall do I want it? Do I want it to be this tall? No, that's a little bit too tall, so we come across like this and we add our frame right the way round, which not only gives us an idea of the floor plan, but can also give us an idea of the structure. And by doing this, you can check out the different heights that you actually want to use for the different sections. So if this is going to be an entranceway, let's say we don't want it to necessarily come all the way up. So let's link that up, and you can see that you've got a height differential there with your main area. Standing in front of the build, you get a good idea of what it is. I'm going to be walking through here, so we can knock through this. I'm going to be coming into the build. There's not going to be this stuff here. It's going to come up this height, so we're going to have a wall that comes up like this. And yeah, I can now see that I've got space. I can have a little storage area in here. I can have all my crafting. You know exactly what you're working with. When it comes to planning villages or towns or anything slightly more complicated than just a simple house, then that's really when the layout of your build does come into its own. So as you can see here, we've set out a little settlement, and we've got a wall going around the outside. We've got ourselves a nice little entranceway here. And then we've also got various different things. A place that we've got with a lighthouse here, so you can use then the terrain to say, what do I want to do? We've got like some little fishing huts down here on the edge, and then we've got this big castle here. It's also, what I've done here, you'll notice, is I've brought everything for each build up to the same level. And then you can actually understand how the height difference is in the ground that you're actually building on, because you can't always build on flat ground, because in real life that doesn't really happen so much. But by bringing everything up to the same level, you can see where you will need to make allowances for these different heights. And yeah, for things like this one, you can see that, well, actually you could have a floor that's one level beneath and some windows potentially here or a back entrance. And yeah, by bringing everything up to that same level, you can see how things are. It's also good when you are planning something like this to make sure that you mix up the shapes that you've got. So we've got some basic square type shapes and rectangular type shapes. And what I've also done is I've thrown in some angled builds as well. Some on 45 degrees, like the majority of the castle here. Some on different angles. Now, I will be covering angled builds and curves and things like that in a later episode of this series, so make sure that you do subscribe for that. But as you can see here, it gives a real nice idea of where everything needs to go. Obviously, you won't necessarily be flying around, but if you are in survival, what you can just do is simply pillar up and have a nice bird's eye view on exactly what you're looking to create. The other thing that you can do when you are creating builds like this is you can use the wool in the same way to actually understand a little bit about the height that you want the builds to be. So here we've got a nice circle, which, as I said, could be something like a lighthouse. What you can do is you can pillar up with the build and with the wool in the middle, and that can give you just an idea of how tall you want it to be. So you might look at that and be, actually, it needs to be, if it's a lighthouse, it needs to be a bit taller. So working again in the 3 dimensions like you might do, and have something here to say, well, it's meant to be a tower, so up here I still want to be able to see it as I'm coming across here. So that's a really nice build, and that's a good height that we're going to have, maybe even a little bit taller, because we can have that. And that starts giving you some structure. It gives you an idea of the variance in the height, because when you are planning your builds, again, try not to make them all at the same height. If you've got something like a little town or a settlement here, then obviously there will be some that will be similar heights, but it's the variation. If you go and look around real buildings, apart from specific lines of terraces, or if you're building something like that, there is quite a lot of variation in things like roof height. So consider that when you're building things out. So in terms of the first step of getting your build planned, choosing where you want it to be, choosing which direction you want it to be, the size and the scale that you want for your build specifically, and how you can lay that out, that's covered everything for this first episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do make sure that you leave a like and a comment if you have. There will be more of these episodes coming out, and as I said, they'll be stepping through the other areas of the building process. But if there is something specifically that you want me to cover, let me know in the comments beneath, and I'll make sure that I can put that in a future video. But with all that said, the last thing to say is thank you very, very much for watching, and I will see you all next time on Adiecraft. Bye!